This is TWiT.
Don't miss All About Android every week. We talk about the latest news, hardware, apps, and now all the developer-y goodness happening in the Android ecosystem. I'm Jason Howell, also joined by Ron Richards, Florence Ion, and our newest co-host on the panel, Huyen Tue Dao, who brings her developer chops. Really great stuff. We also invite people from all over the Android ecosystem to talk about this mobile platform we love so much. Join us every Tuesday, All About Android on twit.tv. But the news from Android Dev Summit Part 2, the devening, isn't done because you've got more, Wen.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. Have you not heard enough of my dev geeking out? Well, you're going to hear some more because now there is released the Now in Android app on the Play Store. So in conjunction with kind of this revamped format for the Android Summit, Google is kind of releasing a revamped showcase app for developers. So in the past, when we went to Google I/O, we're often in bigger numbers. That's awesome. The Google I/O app has kind of been like traditionally this annually produced example of the current best practices and sexiest new features that Android has to offer, as well as just being, the Google I/O app that you can use to look through content schedules. So it had like both a function, like an actual function within the app, and then also served as like an example, and the code was always open source so that you could go and again like learn from Google themselves how to do Android. So now there is Now in Android, which very much is in this vein of serving two purposes. One is like an actual function, and the other is an educational function, and more of like an exemplary. Is that the right word to use there? As an example of Google best practices. So because naming is hard, Now in Android, if you're an Android developer, might sound familiar because it's actually this series of blogs and YouTube videos that the team has been producing as like kind of like your digital newsletter for what's going on in Android, including not just like news events like we talk about, but also like content and like tutorials and instructional videos, all that stuff. So the Now in Android app serves a similar function, but is also a place to kind of browse, search, bookmark all of your favorite news, educational content, and even lets you follow your favorite Android Googlers. I have my favorites. Hey, Chris, and Florina. But it's kind of funny because Google likes to always give developers these like two function apps, right? So it's literally where you can find Android training content and how to do Android, but also just going to the GitHub and looking at the source also teaches you how to do Android. And the code has been available on GitHub for a bit, but now there's an actual Play Store release. So even if you're an Android dev and you kind of just want to see, kind of like the ideal of what an Android app can be, you can certainly download it. And, if you want to like take a look at some Android dev content and see, what the Android team has been doing. If you want an idea of what Material U can look like, it's kind of cool because I think a lot of the times we talk about this very often where Google releases things like Material U, and it's really hard to find good examples of it outside of, I don't know, like the marketing pages, like even like Gmail and other things and other kind of first-party Google apps don't really show it. But if you open Now in Android, you can actually I made a video of it. I don't know, Burke, I dropped a whole bunch of links on you before the show, but I actually, if you kind of really want to see what Material you can really do in terms of like colorizing or personalizing an app, you can do that in Now in Android. Not bad. I just dropped a whole bunch of.
And so you're able to take a look at the examples that are shown within the app, and then does it give you the ability to look at the code behind it?
Oh no, you have to go to GitHub for that. So the app is just a functional app, and then so if you just go into your settings and then go to, my bad, it's like the fourth link. It's a Google Drive link, Burke. My bad. I should have said something before the show.
Yeah, I called it out in the doc with a little red bar for video.
But it's meant to be kind of like a practical example. Instead of like a play example, it's meant to be a practical example. Like here's an app that actually shows a thing. So here's me going into my Z Fold and actually changing between the generated color palettes for Material U. And if I go back to Now in Android, you can actually see. Yeah. And it's the whole thing. It's not just the icon. It's like the whole thing swapping. So you can kind of see, what this actually looks like. Because again, with Material U, it's all dependent on like developers actually doing something with it. Mm-hmm. So this kind of gives us both inspiration and example on how to do it. So yeah, if you look into the code, you'll see an app entirely built in all the fun things like Kotlin and Jetpack Compose drink. And a lot of like, the recommended practices for app architecture, modularization, all that stuff. So it's kind of a great thing because honestly, like before when they would make the Google I/O app, the like showcase app every year, it's like, well, if I'm not going to Google I/O, it's kind of meh. And also the fact that it's like a new code base every year, it's kind of like, why can't you just keep like the same code base and just have it like update naturally, like as Android development evolves? So I don't know. There's a lot of fun stuff in this. And yeah, it's a really well done app and what hopefully Android app should look like.
Do you think the Google I/O app will still be what it was as far as kind of like, or is this replacing that as far as an app that showcases certain things that, certain contexts and whatnot that developers can kind of base their work around?
I'm not a hundo, but I think it's more towards that. Also with, I think like the Google I/O app for this year, I think it was just mobile web. I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure like a lot of like the Android Dev Summit and the Google I/O, I think they were relying on mobile web, and then maybe they're just pouring all their efforts into this, which is kind of like a central place to do all these things. And maybe sometimes when you have, a code base that lives for a long time, it's easier to like get stuff done. Whereas like, kind of conference-driven development can be a little bit messy. So maybe this is just a better maintained place where you can learn things, which is really, really important. I think like something like this is really invaluable, especially as an Android dev, whether you're new or old, because keeping up is important. And like literally saying, Google, how am I supposed to use this thing? And then having like concrete examples along with a working app really helps a lot.
Do we think that Google I/O is going to, this is totally unrelated, but I'm willing to go there. Is Google I/O going to be back to its normal self this year, do you think?
After someone who has experienced at least personally one, but several like back to normal events, I attended New York Comic Con in October, which was a very much back to normal, 100,000 people in Javits Center. I also attended an event at Google in New York City last week that was in person, not virtual. And there was a lot of, isn't it great to be back in person, stuff like that? So clearly the company doesn't have a problem with hosting an event and it wasn't a big event. It was maybe 200 or so people, but still that's more than, like the seats weren't socially distant. They were right next to each other and there was a happy hour and all the things that go with it. It felt real normal.
There's a lot of whatever. We're back, whatever. Going on right now.
I would assume that I/O would be back to normal. Next
I'm
year.
kind of getting that feeling too.
So I didn't go to the Android Dev Summit in London, but I did like very forlornly look at pictures of all my Android fan friends hanging out, and I think they were like going out and hanging out in London. There might have, I don't think karaoke, but they were like, everyone was hanging out, no mask on. Like if you had shown me a picture from that and showed me a picture from like the before times, I would not have noticed a difference. So might be back to, I think as long as everything was okay, it might very good chance to be back to business, back to normal, back in business. Next year.
And it'll be, it's always that kind of springtime leading into on the cusp of summer and everything. So maybe that will change numbers and whatnot. I get the feeling that we're probably going to see a back to normal Google I/O this year, but I don't know. Maybe Google's kind of like, I don't know. Do we have to do the back to normal thing? Like, the tech companies are hurting right now. If you haven't, if you've been paying attention, they're laying off a lot of people right now. So maybe they're looking to save their money.
A little bit.
A little bit.